Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today our guest is Matthew Sanford. Hi Matthew.
Hi.
And it's interesting how we find people as our guests on Conscious TV. And we had a guest about a year ago, Vidyamala Birch, and I read her book first, and she mentioned in her book, Matthew's book, which is called Waking. And I read this book and I was incredibly touched by the book. Not just the story, but the courage. And you'll find out when we talk to Matthew, there's so much behind this book in itself. We've talked a bit before the interview. We're actually in Tri-Yoga Studios in Soho in London, where Matthew's just taught a weekend. And we're going to start at the beginning of the book, which is very dramatic because you have a car accident. You're 13 years old.
Yeah, my family, we're driving home from Kansas City, Missouri to Duluth, Minnesota on what seemed like a harmless day. It was 31 degrees and misting, and the unthinkable happened to my family. We hit preference racing going down a bridge. We tumbled all over the overpass, down the overpass. My father and sister were killed. My mother and brother didn't sustain any physical injuries to speak of, and I went through a shredder. I broke my neck at C1. My back at T456. I broke both my wrists. I filled the lung with fluid, and I sustained an injury to my pancreas that left me unable to eat for 2 months. So I went from 119-pound, 13-year-old athletic boy to 79 pounds in less than 60 days. And I was in a coma for 3.5 days. That's part of why the book's called Waking, is that I literally was sleeping in the car before the car accident happened. And then I woke up to a completely different life.
So you woke up in hospital, and I think one of the first things you heard was that your father and sister were dead.
Yeah.
Incredible shock.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because people think that when you're that injured, you can't process very much. You know, it kind of was like, oh, Laura and Dad are dead? Okay. What happened to me? Okay. And it's just like, it's all coming in so fast. It wasn't like I could really take it in. Survival had clicked in. That I just had to take in what it was, and I kind of knew. I looked at my remaining family, my mother and my brother, and I could see in their eyes, the hurt in their eyes, and I knew I had to live. And I'd like to take credit for it, like I overcame what happened. Not at all. All of a sudden, I just went, survival led me forward. There's something in us that goes towards living. And that 13-year-old boy had that in him.
And you also talked in the book that you felt that you had to live for them to some extent as well.
Well, I think that was a healing story that got me through. I was so injured and so near death that even the doctors later on, when I was in intensive care, told my mom that it's really good that Matt doesn't know how injured he was. So I think it wasn't just for them. I also think that it was for me to say, they need me to live. And to actually, in some ways, leave my own situation and think about them. It's amazing. It's a community that survives trauma and loss. I, right there, went outward to them to get through what I was going through. And it wasn't conscious. That's just what my survival did. My love of them drove me forward.
And you had incredible pain, didn't you?
Oh, physically? Yeah. I mean, you know, yeah, just extraordinary physical pain, but also, you know, the amount of loss when you absorb so much trauma, and not only was it physical pain that knocked me out of my body, but the feeling of loss and change around me. And then my body, I can't feel my body in the same way, you know, and by the time I am getting better, it's not a body I recognize. That feeling of loss and was evident all the way through. All the way. Even now, my body's different than I expected. You know, my life changed in a way that...
And you also talked in the book about how to escape the pain, you would leave your body.
And you know, it's funny because there's a pivotal scene where I actually have a halo cast put in, and I literally have an out-of-body experience where all of a sudden they're screwing screws into my head to stabilize my neck. And I go up and I can see the boy below me. And you know, I don't know about if that experience, if there had been a time-lapse camera in the room, if they would have caught a little metaphysical entity up there. Our culture gets worried about questions like that. I so don't care about that. Here's what I know for sure. I was almost dead. I was drugged up to beat the band. And most importantly, I know what I experienced.
But how did that impact you in terms of your looking down on your body?
At the time, I was only 13. I couldn't process it too much. What it did was show me how to avoid pain. So what ends up happening through the rest of, because a lot of things happened to me, the violence didn't stop at the accident scene. It began. The corrective violence saved my life. The screws in the head were just one of them. So I had an overt out-of-body experience there, right? But when they like re-broke my wrists without anesthesia, when all these other things started happening, I started to learn how to merge with the lights. That little boy all of a sudden went and left his body and let my body absorb all the trauma while my mind stayed in a different place. And we know this can happen. Little kids disassociate all the time from trauma and sexual abuse and abuse, right? So do sexual assault victims. The fact that human consciousness, the mind can separate from the body, is a survival feature built into human being. It's fabulous, but the story of waking is the story of getting comfortable being disconnected from the body. That has its own price to pay, and that's the story of waking.
Yeah. So when you say comfortable, you used the word comfortable for me, disconnected with the body. You weren't really comfortable. It was a way of coping at that time.
Right. It was a way to have, like, everyone through pain disconnects from their body. Right? That, I mean, I think leaving your body is this thing that people think is a big deal, but think about it. Think about that time that you were driving down the interstate or whatever, the road, the highway here in England.
Motorways, we call them.
Okay, there you go. Right? And you're going 70 miles an hour, whatever the speed limit is, and all of a sudden you startle and you realize you haven't noticed the landscape in 20 minutes. Where do you think you went? You disassociate from the body all the time. You're listening to someone talk to you, and suddenly
I think this is different because you learnt very young to actually do that with your mind. It was
my
like
point is that these
step.
experiences are on a continuum, right? That was most extreme, and I learned out of survival how to avoid pain. But this phenomena is in all of our everyday experience too. And when you start to realize it, instead of thinking that you're listening to my story and reading Waking and having it be this thing that's way out of your experience, no, we leave our bodies all the time. I'm a yoga teacher now because I learned then that the mind-body relationship is in constant flux. It changes from minute to minute, from hour to hour, and it really changes from year to year. And that's part of why I'm a yoga teacher.
Yeah, we'll come on to this later. I just want to get the sequence of the story so people understand the context and how you learnt things, because it's very important, I think, to understand the process of your understanding and your development. So there was a time when you couldn't actually eat, your stomach was frozen, you were just fed through IVs?
Through a tube in my neck. And they weren't very good at it then, they didn't have the right nutrients then, they didn't know how to do it. And so I lost a lot of weight, and it was a threat to my survival. And my digestive system just fell silent. They don't know what happened, like they don't know why.
So it just shut down, it was in shock presumably.
They just shut down, and they knew there was an injury to my pancreas because the bile from my pancreas was spilling in all over my stomach, and I got an ulcer from it. But when I remember asking the pancreatic doctor, what happened? Why is this not working? He said, I don't know. And I remember asking him, what are you going to do? And he said, the body's the best healer. We have to wait. Which
is quite an advance for a doctor to say that in a way.
Well, they had no other option.
Yeah.
So they trusted the life energy of a 13-year-old boy to find its way back to living. And it did. And suddenly one day, boom, it just turned back on. They started hearing growling in my stomach again. And then bringing me back to food took a long time because my stomach couldn't take it. It was not a quick process. The first meal I wanted to have as a 13-year-old boy, stupidly, I wanted a hot dog with relish on it. Made me sick for about a week. Yeah. That was the wrong thing to choose. But to a 13-year-old boy who hadn't eaten in 2 months, seemed like the right thing.
So you also had to move hospitals because your mother felt that you weren't getting the care that you should do, and that was, you were taking a long way in an ambulance, which was quite a painful process. So it was very much a time of not knowing for the rest of your family as well, surviving part of your family. And I know when you finally got home, it was a shock for your mother because the reality then hit her of what it meant. She lost her husband, she lost one of her children, and now she had someone she had to take care of.
And I think that, like, I was in Rochester. I woke up in Des Moines 3.5 days later in a hospital in Des Moines, Iowa. And then the care we didn't think was good enough. My mom didn't think it was good enough. I went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. I was there for 3 months. That whole time, she never left my side. But my brother had to go home and finish his senior year in high school. Mm-hmm. So he went home and lived alone for 2 months during that time. But she cared for me and made sure I was okay because she wouldn't go home without her youngest, right? But she didn't encounter the loss that was waiting for her in her life. And so when I got to Duluth, to Miller-Dwan, a different hospital, a third hospital, that's when the reality started to really hit her on a different level.
So she's in shock herself.
All the way through. When you go through that much trauma, you think you're okay. You got
it hits you in time.
It unfolds over time, for sure. It's the idea that somehow in one moment I found out what happened to my family and me and I figured out what to do. That's not how it goes. Life unfolds slowly and you realize what's happened slowly.
Anyway, you went back to school after a time. And
I missed the last 3/4 of 7th grade. And then they let me just start in 8th grade because I was a relatively smart guy.
Yeah. Well, you talk about yourself being a straight-A student. You were a very smart guy by the sound of it. But what was that like, going back to school and seeing your school friends, but physically you were completely in a different place?
I had such amazing core friends. I don't know if I would have been able to do as well as I did if I hadn't. They just brought me back into the fold. I just happened, we would do all sorts of stuff, and I just was in a wheelchair. And I went back in 8th grade, and I got elected student council president at the end of 8th grade for 9th grade. I mean, I got accepted not just by my core friends. I became that interesting guy that had this horrible thing happen, who was just stepping back into life.
Yeah. And you were able to go out with girls, and you actually had sexual relationship with girls, which must have been amazing.
In high school, I didn't have it in junior high. I definitely had it a little bit later.
So you kind of were really getting back as much as you could into life again.
Living the life that I thought I was supposed to. Showing that I was okay. That despite that I was disabled, I was going to live a normal life. And that's part of what Waking's about, is the way that I was guided by the medical model, by everything, to just overcome my disability. Basically what I was told was that my life below my point of injury, sensation below my chest, was going to be over. And all I could do was compensate for that loss. I could make my upper body really strong, and I could learn to drag my paralyzed body through life. And that was not just a metaphor for my body. That was like, okay, Matt's disabled, but he can still. And I got invested in showing and proving that I was just like any other person. But I wasn't.
But you see, you had this incredible spirit at that time. And that somehow kept you going, didn't it? Well, where did that spirit come from?
It's so... I think innocence is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. I think one of the very sad things that happens to us as we age is we think the world can take away our innocence. Innocence is lost only because we let it. It's something you earn back. So a lot of what happened to me is that the innocence got me through that time. I just wanted to live. Survival brought me forward. I just was going to be like any other kid. And then I started to no, my life wasn't how I wanted. And I had put away the 13-year-old boy in order to overcome my disability. I used to tell people I'm 13 going on 41. So I jumped to being an adult. And one of the beautiful things about starting yoga 12 years after the accident is I started to be able to reconnect with the 13-year-old boy. The one that loved hanging upside down. The one that loved like rolling around. So as that came back to me, my innocence came back. And that's why I think I can change the world through mind-body integration. I'm out there trying to say, connect your mind and body and great things will happen. And it's the 13-year-old boy that has the strength to do that. I love that boy. Smartest person I've ever, or not smartest, but strongest person I've ever been around is that 13-year-old boy. I'm so glad I got him back.
There's a quote from your book, from when your first yoga session. Was it someone called Liz? No, it was Carol, was it? Doesn't matter the name anyway. And the quote is, your entire body whispered to you again.
That was a body worker. She was
a body
worker. Right? And what she showed me is that on a subtle level, my body never stopped talking to my mind. It only changed its voice. And that I had to recalibrate how I listened. And as I did, she set the groundwork for me to be able to study yoga, because I all of a sudden realized that it wasn't just lost, that there was it coming towards me more energetically, more subtly, and that if I started paying attention, I could work with it. So the body worker set up me. I've been practicing yoga now for 20 years, right? But it was set up by Carol. Like all of a sudden I heard it. It's like, oh my gosh, those phantom feelings that I was told were not real. All of a sudden I went, huh.
So when you say you heard it, how did that work? How do you actually hear it?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think part of it is that I'm more auditory. Some people might see it. I think some people see visual fields or auras. I don't see them, I feel them. I hear it as vibration or sound. So when I actually listen inwardly and lift my chest, there's a rush of sensation that I can feel go down my legs when I do this. Right now I'm pressing down through my down foot right now, right? And it's like, it's this inward sensation that I have to do what feels like listening in order to hear it.
And how do you first feel when you realized your body was talking to you?
I felt like someone who was living without drinking water for 12 years. Tremendous grief, because
it brought up grief.
Oh my gosh, yes. Because I realized that I had gotten to the place I had without drinking water. Like, how did I do that? And I felt so tired. So like, oh my God, how did I get here? Survival delivered me to Carol. Delivered me to yoga. And I got to lay there and go, oh, I reached the beach. I'm going to be okay. And then I woke up again and started working.
So it was a whole new journey, a whole new way of seeing things.
A whole new world. The world all of a sudden grew in dimension. Like literally, where I am in my body. Like right now when I move, I'm talking to you with my whole body. If you had interviewed me before I started yoga, before I went to body worker, I'd be moving more just as a floating up. I'd just be up here. Now it's like my spine's alive. Like I can feel it and move through my legs. All these things, a whole new world open. That's what I teach people. And I don't just teach people with disability. I taught all weekend here at Try Yoga, teaching people who walk around how to live in their body like this.
Yeah.
This is what we need, and this level of sensation is what we need as we age.
Because you also talk about, in the book, about you realize the body has memory.
Yeah.
And you had flashbacks. I had flashbacks.
You know, I was asleep in the car, like, so I never knew what happened, and I never knew the accident. I was not awake. I never remember the accident scene, right? But I started doing yoga 12 years after, and all of a sudden, as I started moving my spine again, and moving around, all of a sudden I started, and this happened in the hospital because I was having back surgery. And all of a sudden I could feel myself flying through the air, but I couldn't see it. Right? I could feel the impact, I couldn't see it. I could feel my difficult. I collapsed a lung at the accident scene, and I had a really hard time breathing. Apparently, the ambulance didn't get there for 40 minutes, so I started to turn blue right in front of my family. I can feel that struggle to breathe. It came not as visual memory, not as mental memory. I can tell you which side the car hit me from now, and it's all because it came through my body. My body was the one that stayed faithful to living there. My mind couldn't take it, right? It's my body that stayed faithful to living. It's my body that got me through. When I disassociated to the lights to avoid the pain, it was my body that stayed and absorbed the trauma. And it registered it. And remember, at the time, I started having the flashbacks. This is after I started yoga, 12 years after the accident. I'm 25. I'm in graduate school studying philosophy and the mind-body problem. And I'm grappling with arguing about what minds and bodies are. And I'm realizing I know nothing about what bodies are. And all of a sudden, and I think that sensation is just kind of not, is something you have to mentally realize. All of a sudden, my worldview gets turned upside down because my body is conscious. And I realize at a fundamental level that consciousness hums in the body. It's not just thought about by the mind.
Did you say hums in the body?
Hums in the body.
So how did you feel the humming? How did you pick up the humming?
You know, it was just all of a sudden there. And you know how you're in a room or you're outside and you're in the sunlight and then suddenly you feel the sunlight on your skin?
Yes.
And it's not like the sun all of a sudden came out. Yeah. It was there the whole time.
Yeah.
I was laying there and all this trauma was happening to me as a 13-year-old boy, and it's coming at me and all these distractions, and all of a sudden when I actually laid there and felt what I was feeling, not just on a physical level, but what it felt like to be me, there it was. It was humming. And it filled my whole body. And the doctors told me that level of sensation wasn't real because that humming doesn't pick up light touch. So they poked me on the hand. I felt it. They poked me on the foot and they said, "Do you feel that?" And I don't feel it the same way, so I say no. And then they tell me, it's not real. That humming is not real. They gave a bad metaphysical argument. They actually, on the definition of something, not on the fact that something wasn't the same, they concluded something wasn't real. I can tell you they were wrong. That's probably why I went to graduate school in philosophy. It's because that argument was so bad. You know, a 13-year-old kid can be ready for a lot of things, but a bad metaphysical argument from the people in charge, nobody's ready for that. The fact is, though, the subtle sensations in the mind-body relationship, we were all told the same thing. You were told that level of sensation didn't matter and isn't real. The story that Matthew, encounters from the medical model is the same messages we're getting about our own body. The subtle sensations aren't as real. They're not as dynamic.
So in fact, it's the same for all of us.
That's why
I can feel my legs. You can't feel your legs, but
there's a level of sensation in there
that I'm not aware of, that you're aware of.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I actually think I have an advantage in yoga in a lot of ways from someone that is walking around. That's why I'm here teaching 60 people at a time, because I hear something they don't. And it's not because I can do something they can't. I hear something they don't. I have access to something that they don't have.
So I'd just like to explore a little bit further before we go into how you teach your yoga, this memory in the body, which I find fascinating. So you experienced it very directly with a traumatic event in the car crash, and you could remember things then you couldn't remember previously.
But the memories weren't mental, they're different.
Go on.
They were sensations that ran through the body.
But
I felt the impact.
It triggered a memory that you could...
But I still don't see the accident scene. I actually feel it in my body, like the feeling of flying through the air.
I see the difference.
Right, you know what I mean? It's like,
okay.
And maybe that is in the mind now too now, but I don't see it. I don't have a mental picture of what happened. I have a sensation that comes out of my body. And it started to happen when I started to twist. When I started to twist in yoga, all of a sudden like ringing out like a dish rag. It ringed out memory, and the echoes started coming through my whole body and through my head.
So the body is storing information.
I think so.
That is wanting us to recognize, to heal, to balance, whatever.
That is at least my experience, and I have taught enough people and helped enough people do that kind of work. Like I work with returning veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq too, and everyone's having post-traumatic stress. They need to let it out through their body. They need to let the echoes of the trauma work out through their body, not just their mind. When it comes through the body, the release is more powerful, in my opinion. And then the mind finally follows. The body leads. It lets it go. It lets the trauma go, and then the mind gets to heal.
Which is actually the other way around. We normally live in the world. The mind seems to lead, the body follows. And I know you also talk in the book about how you realized that you'd borrowed against your body.
I borrowed against the life force of my body. My mind couldn't stay with it. My body absorbed it. And then it was time for me, and what you see is in the last 20 years is me trying to come back to my body and acknowledge what it did for me. It survived. My mind didn't on its own. My body survived and kept my mind stable. Now that's completely the way that backwards from what people think about disability. And as we age, we actually think that our body betrays us when we age. Like you lose flexibility when you're older, right? And it's because you haven't taken your legs wide when you're standing at the coffee maker. When you're waiting for your coffee, you're not living your body in more spaces. You're sitting more, you're doing other things. Your body doesn't ask for that. So
what is the body asking for?
To live in more spaces.
What does that mean practically?
To try not to control so much. The mind wants to try to control everything. Wants to grab muscles and grab experience. The body is the only part of you that's always been here. It is perpetually present. Do you know how much our minds can learn from something that is steadfastly and perpetually present? The world needs presence. We need to land in our bodies.
So for people that don't know, talk more about what presence means to you.
Well, and I talk about the mind-body connection too a lot. And I don't mean something that bizarre. I mean like when you lean back, you feel less in your legs. When you change gravity and you press down, you feel your legs more, which I feel too, right? That when I feel more, where my mind experiences my body, is the mind-body connection. Right? That's presence, where they actually intersect. If I sit here and don't have any input from my body, my mind, contrary to Descartes, goes out of existence.
Say that again.
Contrary to Descartes, that wants to say that this precedes existence. When you are completely quiet, when you are completely still, your mind goes out of existence. Your body doesn't. He got it backwards, in my opinion. But there's good reasons for it. At the time when he realized what he realized, that was at the beginning of science. We needed to be the observer. We needed to figure out how to control and work with substance, with the world. It was an important story then. It's the wrong story now.
You see, it takes courage to stay with what you really feel for a lot of people, a lot of the time. Now, you were an extreme case because you had an extreme physical pain. But as you've said, and I think it's absolutely true, we all disassociate and disconnect with our bodies to varying degrees. And to come back and completely feel does take not only attention, commitment, but also courage.
Courage for sure, but it's the source of strength. You're stronger when you feel more. And that's the paradox. I don't just mean emotionally, because the emotions and fear of emotions and what you feel is part of what keeps you out of your body. The betrayal you feel.
So why is that? Why are we in a situation where the emotions kick us out of the body?
I'm just going to give you like an oversimple example. Let's say someone has been abused by their father, and they feel the shame of being hit.
Yeah, but that's extreme.
Right.
We're all experiencing this in some kind of way, aren't we? So
like,
I wonder why.
How about the judgment you feel that you're not skinny enough, or the judgment you feel that your feet are ugly, or that you're not good looking enough?
So we pick up ideas throughout our lives that we should be a certain way, and if we're not, we judge ourselves, and that's the start of disassociation.
That's the start of disassociation.
Yeah. Okay.
Teaching someone to be organically present, honest to goodness. There is a sensation of existence. There's a fundamental sensation. That's what I hear in my paralysis of existence. It's a hum. And you know what the ancient yogis are telling you over time? And monks and Buddhist monks? They're telling you that hum calibrated to sound, it would sound like Om. That's the sound that they think it sounds like. I'm telling you, I know what they're talking about. That's the hum. I don't feel it as an Om. I don't hear it as that particular, because that's how it comes out the mouth, right? That's how it comes into the air. There's a hum here. It's in you too. And when you start connecting to it, you'll start lifting your chest more. You'll start opening to the world differently. You won't be as afraid of what you feel. And it's the source of strength. So it's this exactly the opposite. But disassociating from the body, pulling away from what you feel, that's a survival skill. You put your hand in a burner, you pull it off. You pull away from it. So when you have the acute pain come in, or the acute trauma come in, it makes sense to disassociate for a while. The question is, how do you come back to the body? And that's what I think our culture needs to do. Our humankind needs to come back to the body. The stress of our lives, the speed of it, the complexity of it, we're disassociating from the body.
So when you're doing, you've just done a weekend of different classes here at Tri Yoga in London. So what do you actually do with people? People come along and they sit on the floor on a mat. What do you physically do with them?
We do all sorts of poses, man. I get them to stand up, I get them to ground, I get them, like there's certain things that are principles in yoga that are accessible to everybody. And I teach people with all types of disabilities. So when I say they're accessible to everybody, they're accessible to everybody, right? You have to go down in order to lift up.
I can feel myself lifting up as you say that.
Right,
yeah.
That's a fundamental principle in yoga. In a yoga pose, one of the things you're learning how to do is move in multiple directions at once. Very basic, very simple. You guys, when you stand up, you are pushing down and lifting your spine up, right? That you're going in more than one direction at once. But you don't realize how important that is. Someone with a disability loses that. Loses the ability to move in multiple directions at once so simply. So you teach them how to go down to go up.
But it sounds like, in a way, we all have disability.
We all have disability. I wrote Waking Up. I'm a really private person, and that's an incredibly intimate book.
It is indeed.
It's really intimate, and I'm really private. But I wrote it because all of a sudden, when I started yoga especially, I started to realize that the mind-body disconnection that I live is mirrored in everyone I see. Just takes varying forms. Whether it's emotional trauma that's knocked you out, whether it's fear, whether it's overriding ambition, like overriding, you gotta succeed, you can't fail, you'll do it at any cost, and you don't take care of yourself. Constantly, we're leaving our bodies and coming back to it.
You talk a lot in the book about the silence.
When I talk about the hum, I think the hum is the silence as sensation. So like there's a reason why libraries are quiet, right? Why churches are vastly big. You go in there and feel something, a sense of awe. How about that sense of awe? That resonates right through the silence of you, doesn't it? A sense of awe doesn't resonate through my flexed bicep. That's not where I feel the silence. I feel the silence in the quiet parts of me. And when I move my body, my physical body, congruent with that sense of silence, and I use it, I don't just fight to open my chest. I ground my feet. I move more subtly. I spread across the back ribs. I come more alive, not because I'm jumping off bungee cord jumping, not because I'm climbing Mount Everest. I come more alive because the quiet in me integrates with my life force, and I become more.
So there's an alignment happening by the sound of it.
So the ending scene of Waking is the birth of my two sons. Right? William, who was stillborn, he died in utero 34 and a half weeks. I watched the birth of William and Paul at 37 and a half weeks. The metaphor of life and death traveling in the same belly. That's the story of Waking. That what I was told was loss and death, in fact is, but it has a sensation. And that when you listen to the parts of you that you can't squeeze, you can't control, when you open to that level of sensation, things come to life. It doesn't mean that things are ecstatic and happy all the time, because life has suffering in it. But it's got a sensation. It becomes more full. What do you think beauty is? You take in, doesn't something incredibly beautiful, it doesn't necessarily make you ecstatic. It almost makes you also sad. You feel this beautiful awakening. When you look at the beauty of a sunset, I think you're encountering the silence in your mind-body relationship. It makes you want to sit down and go, oh my God, that is so beautiful. It doesn't make you want to go do a handstand right then, or shoot baskets or run a marathon. Beauty makes you sit down and take notice, makes you get still and go, oh my God.
Is it always with you, this silence?
Yes. There's a silence in you that is not affected by outward sound, and it's alive.
So when something happens that's inconvenient, that used to piss you off, is there still a reaction, or do you find yourself watching the reaction?
It allows me to know and be centered in what I would call the truth. Something goes wrong and goes hard. Like I'm flying over here. Like here's an example of like what it's like to live with a disability. I'm flying over here, it's a 9-hour flight and 8-hour flight, and I can't get to the bathroom because the aisles are too narrow. And I try to make it without peeing the whole time, without going to the bathroom, right? And last hour, I'm having to pee, but I'm thinking, I'm sitting next to a woman, I don't want to catheterize necessarily myself right there next to her. So I decide to try to make it, and it turns out my bladder doesn't make it. And I start to like urinate some, just a little bit and I could be really ashamed of it. I could be thinking that I've done something, but my body did its very best. It could. It made it almost 8 hours. And in that moment, rather than like freaking out and thinking, oh, someone's going to think that, and I should be ashamed, my body did the best it could. That realization comes from a connection to silence. That grounded feeling, I was teaching it all weekend. I was teaching people how to ground. The fact is, grounding comes not just from weight and being heavy. It comes from a silence and a realization of energy in your base. That allows you to stay sturdy through hard times. So yeah, you know what, on the flight home tomorrow, back to the States, I'll be Catherine in that seat. Because I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice.
When you're sitting in the yoga class with your students, you were telling me earlier, you can feel the pose in them. Can you explain that more?
it's crazy. And if you don't have a mind, I want everyone to do yoga, of course, but I want everyone more than do yoga. I want them to have a mind-body practice. I don't care what it is, really. But what ends up happening, and this happens all the time in yoga class, that when you're as you're a student in yoga class, honest to goodness, your teacher can stroll by you or walk by you and it adjusts your pose. And I don't know on what level it is. Maybe they're breathing, maybe they're standing upright. I have no idea, but it happens all the time. Any yoga student that's been a student for a while will tell you that often they get an adjustment from the teacher just by the teacher being near them. Right? And it has nothing, it has to do with maybe that as I come near them, my chest is lifted and they're like, look what you did right there. When I did that, you exactly went with me.
Yeah, and I was aware of that.
That's an adjustment.
Yeah.
How did that happen? You saw it, you felt the lightness that came through. Oh my gosh.
It's like there's an energetic connection.
We're actually, literally interconnected. When you're more in your body, you and I are going to feel that more. When we're disassociated and out of our body, look, let's pull it away from each other. We can pull it away right here. Yeah? We can come into it a little bit, lift our chest, come forward, and like be more open. It ebbs and flows between us, between people.
But you see, this is automatically happening, and the mind getting in the way, thinking, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, but it just happens on its own.
It's already happening. A lot of what I teach is that this level of realization is already here. When you're in a good conversation, what do you think's happening? So, you're actually interacting. When you're in something that's boring, you're actually disconnected. This energy, when we call someone charismatic, what do you think they have? You feel invigorated by the energy. It's not me just giving or the person just giving energy. It's a dynamic that's occurring. I got so much out of my students from my students this weekend. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go home and have to rest on the plane and rest at home because it's like I got to process how much exchange. What teaches is the dynamic, not the person with knowledge. We have it kind of in my mind backwards. We think that I was disseminating knowledge this weekend. No, a dynamic started to happen, it started to flow, and it was exchanged. I learned a ton this weekend. I'm about to start a whole project trying to work with people with eating disorders. And a couple of people came up and approached me that for whatever reason the universe started talking about eating disorders with me. Oh my gosh. I learned a whole bunch this weekend. That's what a good teacher is. A good teacher enters dynamic with students and learns from it.
Something we discussed briefly before we started recording was you feel as we get older, I forget your exact words, but the silence is...
There's an increasing level of inward silence. And that's for a lot of reasons, right? Part of it is that you're not physically as vibrant, right? Your muscles aren't giving the same feedback, or if it's giving feedback, you're getting more sore. It's more pain feedback. I remember watching my son, and he's 11 now, but when he was younger, I'd watch him. He's so vibrant, he can't sit still. I remember him watching Sesame Street, right? Hanging upside down, naked from the waist down, watching Sesame Street, feeling totally alive because he can't sit still when he's watching. I don't have a trouble sitting still. I have more inward silence than he does. He's got more vibrancy on one level, but he can't see beauty like I can. The silence brings you something. It brings you ability to be present in a way that Paul can't be present. He can be physically present. I can be present and listen to someone on a level he can't yet. The inward silence is part of the shift and deepening of consciousness. I believe consciousness is the integration of action and silence, of living and dying simultaneously. When those two merge, consciousness grows. They say in India, true spiritual life can't begin until you're 60. I think it's because it's not until you let go of worrying about what people think, when you have more ability to reflect and feel and be open to what life really was. That's inward silence that allows you to do that. That's aging, is why wisdom often comes out of older people.
Well, it does sometimes.
And sometimes not.
A lot of,
because if you go the wrong way with the silence, if you get bitter with the silence, if you feel like your life didn't give you enough, if you feel like somehow you got ripped off, The silence is going to go exactly the other way.
Yeah, you're saying the opportunity is more there as you get older, but as you say, it can go either way.
It can go either way because that's how the silence
self-destructive
is.
way, you were saying.
Silence can either go towards vitality and living, or it can go towards destruction and violence. That's the issue facing human consciousness now. Where I've never seen someone become more aware of his or her body without becoming more compassionate. It's an observation that drives all of my work. On the flip side, you get more destructive as you leave your body. We need to come to our body. We need to land. This is a crazy world we live in now. We need our bodies more than ever.
So we have maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. For someone who's been watching this and feels somewhere touched and inspired and doesn't necessarily feel they have much of a connection with their body, what's the starting point?
Try noticing your breath more. Don't try to do anything with it. Feel your exhale. Take a slightly longer shower. Some of the best mind-body integration I have is that minute I just be in the shower. Feel sunlight on your skin. Try to notice the taste of water.
So it's just being aware more of sensations.
Learn to be sensual without being sexual. Right? And then also, more practically speaking, lay on your bed sometimes or get on the floor more, right? Which is hard as you get older, right? Spread eagle a couple times. It feels good. There's a reason why kids are all playful and rolling around. Live to as you age, the energy pulls away from the outer edges and moves towards the center and moves away. Go the other way. If you can lay with your chest open, like lay on a pillow, and just get your chest lifted with gravity. Open this to the world. And it happens to be your heart, right? A little tricky there. But it's like, open that to the world. Start living like that a little bit more. I mean literally. I mean like literally get your chest open more. Maybe, unless you have high blood pressure, maybe kind of sneak off the edge of your bed and let your head tip back a little bit. Don't do it if you have really high blood pressure. But actually, let your head get below your heart. It's really good for you. Have a little bit more joy in your body.
It seems like there's a whole adventure that's always ready to be started.
It's the greatest adventure I've ever been on. That's why I'm here. I am filled with wonder at how amazing this is here. And this is something I don't think I would have never known if I hadn't been to the accident I've been in. And I'm just not saying that trying to be a you-rah-rah cheerleader. I'm literally in awe of what it is to be here. That doesn't mean I don't have bad days. I have bad days. Absolutely. Life is hard. But when I reconnect back to the wonder of it, when I feel my body and know that I can actually refine the quality of my experience, by doing something as simple as lifting my chest and grounding my feet, when I realize that it's that accessible to me, it blows my mind. And do eat better, do eat broccoli more, do all the things you're supposed to do. But notice that should energy, whenever there's all these things you should do.
It's about taking time, isn't it?
What?
It's about taking time because we're all so busy in our lives. There's so much to do and there's so much to learn and so much on so many different levels.
Practice, when I say feel your exhale, take a moment between going from one place to another and just feel. I don't mean like feel if you're mad, sad, or happy. I mean just feel. Let it exhale. Like I do this with healthcare workers. I'm teaching nurses to literally, before they go from one room to the next, to ground their feet and take an exhale. And maybe the only time they get to do that is when they're washing their hands between patients. But just to actually feel what it feels like to be them before they go on and give in the next room. They're getting remarkably improvements in energy levels just by checking in with themselves during the day. Check in with yourself during the day. It doesn't have to be for a whole hour. You don't have to go to a whole yoga class. Start with like 30 seconds 3 times a day. Feel. Ground.
Feel the ground.
Which my yoga practice started by taking my shoes off and putting my feet on the earth. I didn't realize one of the worst parts of this injury is that I don't touch the earth with my feet very often. When I put my feet on the earth, when I started for the first time, the hum just went right up through me. It's great. That'd be a thing people could do. Have your bare feet touch some grass once in a while. It's amazing. Listen, feel, take the time.
Take the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a busy world, but we can still take the time.
And you can have moments in the moments, right? So there's a Zen story I heard one time of the Zen teacher walking down the stairs and he's shaking his head. Oh God, he's going like this. And the student's at the bottom of the stairs and says, "Sir, what's wrong?" And he goes, "I have more things to do than I have time in this day." And he stops on the stairs and he turns around and he walks back up the stairs. And the student goes, "Where are you going?" And he goes, "I better go meditate some more to make more time." When you start sitting with yourself more and being in your own skin, in your own body, you're going to find more time, not less. You only get 24 hours in every day. Everyone gets the same amount of time. Choose.
Well, I can feel myself quietening down and not wanting to ask any more questions. We have about 2 minutes left, but anything you want to say for the last 2 minutes?
I'd love to tell you about a nonprofit that I'm trying to make. It's called Mind-Body Solutions.
Great.
We bring mind-body awareness into the healthcare system and into people that serve people with trauma, loss, and disability. So we're teaching them yoga, we're teaching them mind-body practices, we're teaching the caregiver and the end user and the person living with disability. If that's something people are interested in and want to support, please, because our approach is getting so established, like this, the medical doctors and the scientists are trying to study it now, and we need to be able to keep rolling it out. I also want you to, in the last few minutes, to just know that what I'm talking about is simple. The reason why you need to take more time is to let your experience be more simple. Let it be more simple. We got so much complexity. Complexity is going to find you. There's a great quote, I think it's by Longfellow, that says, complexity on the other side of simplicity is worthless, but simplicity on the other side of complexity is priceless. Make it more simple by landing in your body.
That's a great place to finish.
Yep.
Make it more simple by landing in your body. And you're an inspiring example of that, you really are.
Good.
Matthew, I really appreciate you coming along to Conscious TV.
It's been an honor. Thanks so much.
Talking with us. I'm just going to show you your book again, which is such a touching, deep story. And thank you everybody for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.
My name is Matthew Sanford, and I want you to land in your body. So we're going to start by sitting back and slouching in your chair. Just let yourself sit back. Let your legs splail out. Just feel what you feel. It's kind of dull. Notice that it's actually, you think this is relaxing, but it's hard on your neck. It's not very comfortable. If you were to sit like this for a long time, your neck would get sore. So now what I want you to do is sit up, come forward on your sits bones, and put your feet right below your knees, right? Have your knees right in front of your hips, your feet right below your knees. Feel your sits bones, the bones in your rear end. Right now, I want you to let them go. Just drop your chest again and relax. That's your sits bones being like butter, right? Now I want you to make your sits bones like knives. Make them sharp. As you make your sits bones more sharp, feel the movement of awareness up the spine. Lift the front side of the chest. But as you do that, ground down through your feet at the same time. So you're making your sits bones like knives. You're feeling up your chest. but you're also grounding your sits bones down and you're pressing down through your inner heels. Take a couple of breaths. Good. And then release. Notice the difference in quality and sensation when you fall behind the gravity point, behind the balance point. Right? Now come up forward again. Make your sits bones like knives. Lift the front of your chest. Ground down through the feet. I want you to try to broaden, not just across the front of your chest, but across the back ribs too. So you try to lift and broaden across the front of the chest and the back ribs. As you do, feel your inner thighs and ground through your inner heels. So your upper thoracic is broadening. You're grounding down through your feet, down through your inner thighs, and you're breathing. Take a couple of breaths. Good. And then release. Go back and release and go back to the heavier place that you think is relaxation. Now this time I want you to come forward and put your forearms on your legs. And now as you press down with your forearms into your legs, I want you to slightly lift your chest. Breathe, broaden across the collarbones. And then relax. And again, ground the sits bones, ground the sitting bones, ground the feet. Inhale. Ground up, lift up through the chest. And then exhale and let it go back down. Now back up again. Bring your hands on the front of your knees. Ground the sits bones. Pull yourself slightly forward. Lift in and up. Take a breath. And then release and let your back go again. This time I want you to come forward. Ground the feet. Feel the sitting bones. Lift up to the chest. Come back. And then release. And again, now feel. Ground your sits bones. Take a couple of breaths. Broaden across the back ribs. And now stretch out to the top of your head. Good. And then release. Now just notice what you feel. Sit up again. And just notice after moving your spine. Maybe you feel a tingling or a buzz or a little shaky just a little bit. That's the beginning of the silence waking up in you. Your nervous system getting a charge that's living in your whole body. Breathe into that. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of the silence in you coming to life. Good. Thanks. Have a good day.